Welcome to Broad Eye, the podcast that explores knowledge gaps in ophthalmology and eye care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Broad Eye podcast. My name is Sean Maloney, and I'm here with my good friend and co-host, Dr. Bruno Fernandez. Bruno, how you doing?
How's it going, Sean? Pleasure to be here again.
Doing well, and I know you're, well, so am I, but you in particular are very excited about our guest, Victoria Nolan.
Yeah, very, man. Not only because she's into sports like I am, but particularly into rowing, which is a passion on on the family of my wife here in Canada. So they're all very excited, like to see this podcast coming up.
So Victoria, welcome.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Perfect. Thanks. So, I could try to do an introduction for you. I would never do it justice though. So, I mean, you're a speaker, you're a mother, you're an advocate, you're a very successful athlete, and we're going to touch on a number of these areas, but maybe we can just start off by talking a little bit about your vision loss. What caused the vision loss, and how has that changed over time, and what level of sight, I mean, it's hard to quantify in a way that makes sense to people who don't have vision loss, but what level of sight, I guess, would you say that you have at the present moment?
Okay, well, I have retinitis pigmentosa, which is a degenerative disease. So I was born with it, but since no one in my family had it, we didn't even realize there was a problem because you lose your sight slowly. So I actually didn't get diagnosed till I was 18. You typically in RP, you lose your night vision first. So that was one of the reasons I didn't really know that was gone because, as a kid, you don't really go out on your own at night. So yeah, I was diagnosed at 18. And by that point, I'd already lost 90% of my sight, which is pretty amazing to think I was, getting around and managing without even realizing I had lost so much. So I've been losing it steadily since then. Now I'm at the point where I just have a tiny bit of central vision left. I usually describe it like if you were in a room that was pitch black and you had a little flashlight, maybe the size of a pen. That's kind of what it's like. So you can kind of scan around the room and figure out, obstacles that are there, but there isn't a whole lot you can see.
Oh, no, fair enough. And just before I keep going on here, did you ever get genetic testing to understand the mutation, given that it was no family history there?
Yeah, so we've only, when we had it done initially, it was one of those cases where there wasn't a lot known about my particular type of RP. I think as it's progressed, they've been able to name it. Which I actually don't know off the top of my head because it's like a bunch of numbers and there's not a lot of like some types of RP, there's been, clinical trials or they know a little more about it. My type is kind of there's not a lot known at the moment.
It's very cool. I'm an athlete myself, so I'm very curious about your life as an athlete and particularly a rower. So when did you get to that? When did you start rowing, and why did you decide to row?
It's a very odd story. Growing up, I hated sports and stayed away from them because of my vision loss. Teachers didn't really know how to accommodate me. So gym class was just terrible. I did everything I could to sit out of it. Didn't join team sports. But I did love stuff that I could do on my own. I loved dance. I liked to run. So I was definitely athletic. But yeah, I didn't actually turn to sports until I was much older after my kids were born. So I was 30 years old and had 2 kids. My vision had gotten significantly worse with the pregnancies. And I was looking for something that would help me because at that point I was feeling depressed. I was staying in the house. I was actually afraid to leave the house. So I wanted to find something that would inspire me to get out and do something. So I was like, I've got to find an activity that I love so much that I'm not going to be afraid to go out and do it. So I tried a bunch of different sports, and I don't know why I thought of trying rowing. I know the CNIB often suggests sailing to people with vision loss. And so that kind of put me in mind of water sports, but I wanted something a little more active. So then I just checked out if we had rowing in Toronto. And the Argonaut Rowing Club, when I looked them up, they actually had a program for people with disabilities. So that gave me a lot of confidence in thinking, okay, this is something I can do. They're going to support me. And I just fell in love with it right away.
So that's very cool that they have a program like just for people like you. What are the specifics that they do to help you out?
So funny thing is, in my particular case, so when I contacted them and explained my situation, I said, I do have some vision centrally. They decided to have me just try the regular Learn to Row program with everybody else. So the only change that they had to make for me, because initially so we were in a boat of 8 people, and the 8 people, obviously you have to move in time. So initially they had me in the middle of the boat, which wasn't going so well. I wasn't really able to follow the person in front of me, and it was getting a little messy. So they moved me to the front seat of the boat. So then I didn't have to worry about following anyone. I just had to set the rhythm and just focus on learning how to row. So that's what worked for me. But for anyone else, if that situation wouldn't work for you, they'll work with you one-on-one, or they will find, other rowers that you can row with and support you that way. And just, it's really, taking each person as an individual and finding what works for them.
It's interesting you're talking about trying to find a sport that would work for you. So I had a little bit of a similar path, also having RP. I played a lot of team sports as a kid, but I was that guy, when I was 14, 15 years old playing hockey, body contact hockey, but I had to look down to see the puck. So it didn't pan out too well for me a lot of times, but, I eventually navigated, trying to find other sports as well. Rowing, I've tried a couple of times, never really dove into it. I got into running a bit because I was able to find running partners, including my wife. So, and then actually through Bruno. So Bruno he's a world champion in jiu-jitsu, and he runs a couple of jiu-jitsu schools in the Montreal area. And he's also an ophthalmologist. So I don't know if you know his background. He's really good for this podcast. But he said, man, like jiu-jitsu is an amazing sport because it's very, once you've got a hold of the other person, it's all proprioception. Sometimes they'll even do training with the lights off. So, and I know he has some totally blind students as well. So it'd be nice to see if there was, and maybe there are really good resources out there to direct people who want to be active to these different organizations that are more accessible, I guess, or have had clients or participants who are visually impaired, and it'd just be more comfortable saying, hey, I'm visually impaired. Sure, we've accommodated before. It'd be no problem to accommodate you, right? So this is me going off on a bit of a tangent. So I'll do that a lot. Over time, you must have, accumulated a lot of stories, so to speak, whether they're funny, scary, unusual, etc., related to your rowing career. Is there anything that stands out at all that you think it would be interesting for the audience to hear?
I do have a funny story from when I first started. So when I first started rowing at an international level, they have you wear this visor that's like, it's a blackout visor. So it's like ski goggles. If you've ever played goal ball, it's one of those face visors. So basically what it does is because people with vision loss have different levels of vision, it's supposed to level the playing field. So you put on the mask and then you can't see anything. Everyone's at the same level. So that was quite an adjustment, getting used to wearing that. Even when, even though I only had a tiny bit of vision, I of course relied on that, right? So then we had this blackout visor on, can't see anything. So my very first big race, it was at Canadian Henley, which is like a race for Canada and the US. So we had this race, got the blackout visor on. We're representing Canada for the first time. And so as we're going through the race, it's called catching a crab. It's when your oar gets sucked under the water. So that's like disaster, right? So I got it out, but then because I did that, it caused the rower behind me to do the same thing. And his was so bad that we actually had to stop the boat to sort everything out and start again. So I was mortified. I was like, oh my gosh, we're representing Canada. I've just caused us to lose the race because obviously, everyone else has passed us by this point. So we finished the race. Everyone's like silent. No one's saying anything. I was like feeling horrible. And then we start rowing over to the podium. And I was like, that's weird because normally you only go over to the podium if you're winning the gold medal. So we get to the podium and I'm like, why are we going here? And everyone's just like, ha ha ha, like didn't really answer me. And I was like, oh, great. Now I guess they've changed it. So everyone's got to stand there while the team getting the gold medal, you stand there and like applause them or whatever. Anyway, so it turns out we actually did win the race. I had no idea. Nobody told me. So it was a good learning experience that they needed to communicate with me a little bit better.
Now, what's the setup in the boat? Were you the only person? You're not the only person in the boat with a visual impairment, are you?
I was actually, yeah.
Oh, you were?
So
okay.
Yeah. So it was a learning experience. Everyone has different disabilities in the category that I row in. So yeah, I was the only one.
Okay. That's I didn't realize that. I wasn't sure if it's okay. The boat is only people with visual disabilities, or how that worked exactly. So.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So it's any disability, right? Physical, like.
Yeah, so it's essentially there's 3 categories in rowing. The category that I'm in is if you can use your legs as part of the stroke, and then there's another. So we're PR3. That means that you do the full stroke with your legs, and then there's PR2 where you can use your body and arms but not your legs, and then there's PR1 where it's arms only.
All right, very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Taking a more practical approach, like to the life of an athlete, to become a professional athlete, right, and have that as your career, it is pretty risky and considered almost reckless by some people, like that don't see so much of a future, like investing your life into sports. And I see that a lot with like the young students that I have. There's usually a lot of resistance from the family that try to push them into having a more conventional career, going to school or be a lawyer, a doctor, or whatever. Uh, you said that you started your career quite late into sports, but did you have any resistance from the people around you that you shouldn't invest so much time into it and do something more like, let's say, normal?
I think one of the reasons that I've been so successful is I've had incredible support from my husband. I think if he hadn't been so supportive, it definitely would have been a challenge. My parents did think it was, I shouldn't be taking it on. It was too much. But by then it's not like I was living with them, so I took what they were saying with a grain of salt. Yeah, it's definitely a risk, and it's scary, but I mean, how I said, like, I was looking for something that I loved so much that it would get me out of the house. I mean, when you love something this much, it's worth it. I mean, I couldn't imagine not doing it. Yeah, it's just I think for me especially, it's so much more than just the love of the sport, because when I'm out there on the water, I feel like that's me, like that's the real me. When I'm trying to walk around, avoiding obstacles, I've got my guide dog, I'm like slow, but when I'm out on the water, it's so liberating and graceful and fast. And so that's where I feel like I'm at home.
I can certainly recognize that, some of the day-to-day things, like crossing the street, and I tell my wife, like, I feel like I'm able to do a lot of things in my life, but sometimes the very basic things you need help with, and that feeling of dependence is not fun. But then when you find yourself in your element and you're just doing it even better than somebody who's sighted, you really start soaring. I'm going to jump around a little bit here because you talked about your guide dog, and I don't know if you want to share this story, but I heard about a story once upon a time when you were competing. I think it was in the US somewhere, and there was an issue with your guide dog and where you were staying. Is that ring a bell, that story?
Yeah, I've had a number of those incidents. There was one, we were going to train in Miami and we were trying to book a hotel, and there were several hotels that told us they wouldn't accept dogs, even if it was a guide dog. So in the States, they have the Americans with Disabilities Act. So I was able to file a complaint through that, and we got it resolved. So they retrained all their staff, and they put a sign up saying service dogs welcome. And yeah, it's frustrating. I mean, my husband made a joke that like my guide dog's probably a million times better behaved than the people that go down there for spring break, but
that's
I agree with
true.
that.
There you go. There you go. No, that's interesting to hear it. And you can imagine when, people who, if you're booking this in advance and you find that out is one thing. If you on the spot, then you show up and you expect these accommodations to be made. And you're told not, we have to turn you away because you have a dog. It's got to be a little bit tough. Like, it's not tough enough already to navigate around with vision loss. Then you have to face that, right? So
exactly.
With the rowing, do you find that we hear stories that when you lose one sense, that other senses tend to be strengthened or more utilized. Do you think that that's your case whenever you're out in the water rowing, whether or not you have that visor on? Do you feel that you feel more when you're connected more to the water when you're rowing, or you're hearing more? Do you think any of your senses are heightened when you're doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely the boat feel is heightened. And just like you were saying with jujitsu, that you'll train people with the lights off, or that's a technique for rowing too, is trying to get rowers to close their eyes and just feel the rhythm of the boat. You get a lot of information from it. So yeah, that's definitely heightened for me.
Has that translated anywhere else in your life, you think, the heightened sense of feeling or hearing as well, or does that really just stand out in the rowing career?
I do feel like I have heightened like spatial awareness in my everyday life, but it's a little bit different than boat feel. Boat feels kind of like a rhythm. It's like almost like dancing, like feeling the rhythm of it and the movement. Maybe I should try dancing and see if I'm good at that.
Well, you're going back to your roots. You used to be a dancer,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
There you go.
Changing a bit the subject, I once had a bit of contact with the Canadian national basketball team for people with hearing disabilities, and they were going to compete in the World Championship, but they didn't have any funding like to do so. So we helped them like organize some fundraising events so they could bring the whole team, because they were considering bringing just half of the team, because of like cost reasons,
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like was a bit shocking for me, to know that like the national team didn't have the funds to go compete in the World Championship, and I wonder how it's for rowing, if it is as difficult, to get support, or if it is any better.
Yeah, we're pretty lucky in rowing. Rowing Canada has been phenomenal, and as far as having, it's one team. It's not like the able-bodied team and the Paralympic team. We're treated as one. So there's a lot of support from Rowing Canada. Also from the Canadian Paralympic Committee, there's a lot of support. I think that's probably the issue with deaf sports, is that they're not considered under the Paralympic Committee because it's not a physical disability, or I'm not sure what the reasoning is, but so we do get a lot of support from the Canadian Paralympic Committee. I think Canada does a pretty good job in general. You do hear about other countries that have it better than us, but I think generally speaking, we're very lucky.
Now, are you still training and competing and as a rower?
Yes.
So what's on the menu then? What's the next competition coming up?
So we still have to qualify for Tokyo. So at the beginning of June, we have a race in Italy to qualify. And then assuming that we go forward from that, we will be competing in Tokyo, hopefully at the end of August.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so now I'm gonna go on a tangent again, because this is how I operate in life. The what does training look like for you right now? Now that you're 2 months away, 3 months away from this event in Italy, what's your training look like?
So it's 6 days a week. Typically it's a 2-hour session on the water in the morning, and then in the afternoon there's a hour-and-a-half session, either weights or a cross train or something like that. So yeah, but it's about 3.5 hours a day.
It's fairly intense, yeah.
I think I think you can quite proudly receive the label of a super mom, right? And then you do all that and you still have 2 kids. It is pretty crazy. Your day must have more hours than than the normal people. Uh, and I mean, besides sports, you're quite active, right? I've seen that. You've authored a book, and you also have speaking engagements. So besides preparing for the next Olympics and raising your kids, like do you have other other things that kind of like taking time as well?
I do actually. I guess I'd like to be busy. I did write a book. I'm working on a second book. So yeah, I'm finding I don't have a whole lot of time to devote to that. And I love to actually, I'm really getting into audiobooks lately. So doing a lot of reading in my spare time. But yeah, other than that, I also, I do work for the CNIB as well for their guide dog program. So I do like education and awareness about guide dogs as well.
Yeah, we're actually gonna have a guide dog trainer as a guest very soon, right, Sean?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, that's going to be coming up in a couple weeks, actually, and pretty excited for that episode. So, okay, so super mom, Olympic athlete, hopeful, CNIB. You're doing a lot of things. Authoring the book. Can you tell us just a little bit about what your book is, I guess, and where people can go buy 1 million copies?
It's called Beyond Vision: The Story of a Blind Rower. You can get it anywhere online, like bookstores, Amazon, whatever. So it's basically, it starts out with my diagnosis of like when I found out that I had RP, and then my journey through discovering rowing. And then I can tell you the ending because you would see it if you looked me up online anyway. But at the end of the book, we actually break the world record and win a gold medal. So it's a pretty good ending.
So the next book is going to talk about the Olympic gold medal. Is that the idea? Is that
Hopefully, yeah.
Right? Is that what's the angle of the second book, I guess, if you don't mind me asking?
I kind of want to juxtapose how, like, I hear a lot of times, people say, oh, it's so amazing that you row and you've accomplished so much, and what a great, great life that you have. But then on the flip side of that, I don't share as much about the difficulties. And I think I'd like to draw attention to that. Like we were saying about, trying to travel with a guide dog and being denied access to places, and just being afraid when you get in a cab or you can't you don't know the person, you got to trust a stranger. And yeah, and I just think, I really promote the other side of how great things are, but I think it kind of balances out. There's a tough side too.
It's also, it's like you said, it's the superhuman side of you gets showcased, but then the human side of you maybe gets downplayed, but it's still very much present in every day, right?
Yeah, and there's so many people who are living that human side, right? And I think we need to hear those stories.
Yeah, that's great. Looking forward to that book and those stories. You're definitely inspiring. I think that's kind of like being Mr. Obvious here, and I think we're coming to a wrap, and I wonder if you would like to leave a few words of encouragement for the young ones that hopefully are gonna listen like to this, and they're full of doubts about like their potential, and like maybe they've been diagnosed with whatever condition that might be perceived as a disability, and I mean anything out of your experience that could motivate them to kind of like take their dreams and make them come true.
Yeah, I had doubts when the first time I was invited to try out for the national team, and I had doubts. And I honestly, if it was just up to me, I probably would have declined the invitation because I thought I wouldn't be good enough. But I had so much encouragement from other people who basically said, you know, like, why just go and try it? Like, who knows? It might just end up being a good story, but you might make the team. So, you know, you're not going to make the team if you don't go. I loved that idea of just having a good story to tell. And that's what got me out there. And then, you know, the rest is history. So I think, yeah, don't shy away from giving it a try. And, you know, if you try it and you hate it, you can stop. But what if you love it? And what if it goes somewhere? And I also think it's important that if you're listening to this and you have no interest in sports, I would say, give it a try. Like, try some different sports. I'm sure there is one out there that you would enjoy, and not necessarily, you know, at a Paralympic level, but just something that where you can feel, like I was saying, like you feel at home, you feel free. I would explore that.
So a couple of quick things come to mind as we wrap up here. So there's a pretty famous Michael Jordan quote that says you'll always miss 100% of shots you don't take. So I think that, you know, you certainly have shown that just take those shots, and sometimes it works out. You know, Bruno was asking you, is there any advice for the young ones? But I'm not really a young one, I guess. I'm almost 40, but you know, I take your advice as well too. There, like when you got into this at age 30, and so as much as your advice is for young, you know, the kids out there, it's for people when they're excuse me, in 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s who might find themselves suddenly with, you know, a physical disability or mental disability, or just, you know, it makes me want to accept all these crazy fitness challenges my brother who's 10 years younger than I am puts forth for me. So you've inspired me to do that, and I will let you know how that goes. But I want to thank you for joining us today. It's certainly a lot of fun talking to you. We're going to probably have to have you back for round 2 at some point, because as soon as we air this episode, Bruno's family is going to have about 40 to 50 follow-up questions and requests, and a link to your book on the website. So if anybody wants to buy that book, we'll see if we can help you sell tens of thousands of copies overnight. And awesome. That'd be great, eh? So yeah. But listen, thanks so much for participating, Victoria. We certainly enjoy the conversation, and we wish you all the best in your upcoming training, and look forward to see you holding that gold medal.
It was a lot of fun talking with you guys. Thanks.
And that concludes today's episode of the Broad Eye Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. Of course, ratings and reviews are always welcome. And you can certainly share this episode with any of your colleagues or friends who might enjoy it. Thanks for listening.